My wife stood in court, confident she had me beat. She sneered, knowing I, a simple teacher, couldn't afford a lawyer. What she didn't know was that my lawyer wasn't on my payroll. He was my estranged, cutthroat older brother, and he was about to make her regret ever underestimating our family. My wife, Evelyn, detonated our 8-year marriage last Tuesday. There was no preamble, no tears, no heartfelt conversation. It was a cold, calculated business decision. We were sitting in the living room of the house we'd built together, a house where we'd hosted holidays, celebrated birthdays, and weathered storms. A house that my own grandfather had helped me secure the down payment for. And she spoke to me not as a husband, but as a subordinate being downsized. "It's over, Tom," she said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. She slid a crisp file folder across the coffee table, a gesture that felt both rehearsed and brutally final. "I've already consulted an attorney. Those are my terms. I didn't need to open it." She was more than eager to list her demands, like a victor dictating the terms of surrender to a defeated enemy. She wanted the house, our home. She wanted 70% of our shared savings, the nest egg we had painstakingly built. And she wanted spousal support, a steady income from me for a minimum of 5 years. It wasn't a proposal. It was a liquidation. When she finished her list, she leaned back into the cushions of the sofa, a smug, satisfied smirk playing on her lips. It was the look of someone who had already won and was just waiting for the formalities to be over. "And I really don't want to fight on this, Tom," she said, her voice adopting a tone of condescending pity that made my skin crawl. "Let's be realistic. You're a high school woodshop teacher. It's a noble profession, but you can't afford a real lawyer to fight me. My attorney will bury you in legal fees before you even get a court date. The smartest thing for you to do is just sign, agree to the terms, and walk away with your dignity." I just sat there, looking at this woman who had become a complete stranger to me. This wasn't just a divorce. This was an annihilation. She saw my quiet nature not as a strength, but as a weakness to be exploited. She believed my modest income was her greatest weapon, the key to ensuring she could crush me without any resistance. I let the silence stretch, letting her savor her perceived victory. Then, I looked her in the eye, letting my shoulders slump in feigned defeat, and I gave her the 2 words she was so desperately waiting to hear. "You're right." The relief that washed over her face was palpable. The simple, humble teacher wasn't going to cause any trouble. She had won. "Good," she said, standing and smoothing down her expensive skirt. "I'm glad you're being sensible. You'll be served with the official papers sometime next week." And with that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me alone in the ruins of our life. Here's what Evelyn knew about me. She knew I was a man of simple means. She knew I didn't have a war chest of cash to fund a protracted legal battle. She also knew I had an older brother, Marcus. What she was banking on, the cornerstone of her entire strategy, was that Marcus and I hadn't spoken a single word to each other in 5 long, bitter years. You see, Marcus isn't a woodshop teacher. Marcus is a predator in a $1,000 suit. He is, without a hint of exaggeration, the most feared, most expensive, and most successful divorce attorney in the entire state. His name is a whispered legend in the courthouse halls, a man who doesn't just win cases. He dismantles his opponents, piece by piece. And, for all intents and purposes, he was no longer my brother. Our falling out was a stupid, prideful thing, born from the grief of losing our parents. It was over the house we grew up in. I'm the sentimental one. I wanted to keep it in the family, a place filled with memories, a place for our future kids to connect with their roots. Marcus, ever the pragmatist, saw it as an illiquid asset, a liability. He wanted to sell it, split the proceeds, and move on. The argument was ugly, and we said things that cut deep. We ended up on opposite sides of a canyon of stubbornness and hurt, and we hadn't spoken since. Evelyn had seen the fallout. She had seen my pain and my isolation from the only powerful person I was related to. In her cold, strategic mind, my brother wasn't just a non-factor. He was a dead asset, and she was about to find out just how wrong she was. For 3 days after her announcement, I spiraled. I was trapped in a dark, suffocating fog. She was right about one thing. I couldn't afford to fight her, not with a public defender against the kind of high-powered firm she had hired. The thought of losing everything, of being left with nothing but debt and humiliation, was paralyzing. On the fourth day, I hit the absolute bottom. And from there, I had nowhere to go but up. I took a deep breath, gathered every last shred of my pride, the same pride that had cost me 5 years with my brother, and I found his private cell number. My hand was trembling so badly I could barely dial. I fully expected it to go to voicemail or to be answered by a cold, efficient assistant. But after 2 rings, a deep, familiar voice answered, a voice I hadn't heard in half a decade. "Hello, Marcus," I said, my own voice cracking, sounding weak and foreign. "It's Tom." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, a crushing weight of 5 years of unspoken words. I thought he was going to hang up. Then he spoke. "Tommy," he said, using the childhood nickname that felt like a relic from another lifetime. "What's wrong?" And the dam broke. It all came pouring out of me in a torrent of pain and fear. I told him everything. Evelyn's cold declaration, her predatory demands, her high-priced lawyer, and finally, her ultimate arrogant taunt. "You can't afford a lawyer to fight me." Another long, pregnant pause. When Marcus finally spoke again, his voice had changed. The surprise was gone, replaced by a tone I hadn't heard since we were kids on the playground, and a bully had pushed me down. It was the sound of a protective older brother. It was the sound of cold, hard steel. "She said what?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I repeated her words. "Okay," he said, his voice now clipped and all business. "When and where is the first court appearance?" "Next Tuesday, downtown courthouse," I managed to say. "I'll clear my schedule," he replied. "Don't talk to her. Don't sign anything. Don't even look at her lawyer. You just show up on Tuesday. I'll meet you there." Before I could even thank him, he hung up. I sat there in the silence, my heart hammering against my ribs. Evelyn thought she had me cornered, disarmed, and ready for slaughter. She had no idea that her own arrogance had just handed me a nuclear weapon. She was about to learn a very painful lesson about underestimating a quiet man, and an even more painful lesson about what family truly means. The morning of the hearing was gray and miserable, a steady rain slicking the city streets. It felt fitting. I walked into the courthouse alone, feeling like the defeated man Evelyn expected me to be, wearing my only suit, the one I kept for life's most significant and somber occasions. The courtroom itself was a sterile, soulless place. Evelyn was already there, seated at the plaintiff's table, looking like she owned the room. She was wearing a sharp, dark blue power suit, a portrait of cool, corporate confidence. Next to her sat her lawyer, a smug-looking man in his 50s who was laughing at something she'd said. When she saw me walk in, her smile flickered, replaced for a moment by a look of thinly veiled pity. I met her gaze, kept my expression neutral, and walked to the defendant's table. I sat down and placed my worn leather briefcase on the table and waited. Her lawyer sauntered over, oozing a condescending charm. "Mr. Miller," he began, "I'm glad you're being sensible. I trust you've reviewed my client's very generous proposal. If you're ready to sign today, we can make this whole process quick and painless." "I'm waiting for my counsel," I said quietly. He actually let out a small chuckle. "Your counsel? Right. Well, let's not drag this out, shall we?" The bailiff called the court to order, and the judge, a stern-looking woman, took her seat. "Miller versus Miller," she announced. "Are both parties present and represented?" Evelyn's lawyer shot to his feet. "Yes, Your Honor. Alan Davis, representing the plaintiff, Mrs. Evelyn Miller." The judge looked expectantly at my empty chair beside me. Before I could speak, the heavy doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a resounding thud that echoed through the silent room. Every single head turned. Striding down the aisle was my brother, Marcus. He wasn't just wearing a suit. He was wearing an aura of pure, predatory intimidation. He moved with a confident, measured grace, his expensive briefcase swinging at his side. A ripple of whispers spread through the room as other lawyers and court staff recognized the legal titan in their midst. His reputation was a palpable force. He didn't acknowledge anyone else. His eyes found mine, and he walked directly to my table. He placed a hand on my shoulder and gave it a firm, reassuring squeeze. Then he sat down beside me, placing his briefcase on the table with a solid, definitive click. I risked a glance at Evelyn. The smug confidence had been wiped from her face as if by a physical blow. Her expression was a mask of slack-jawed, horrified disbelief. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. Her lawyer looked even worse. The color had drained from his face, his condescending smirk replaced by a look of pure, primal fear. He knew exactly who had just sat down across from him. Marcus leaned over to me, his voice a low whisper only I could hear. "Sorry I'm late, little brother. Traffic was hell." A hint of a smile touched his lips. Then he straightened up, his entire demeanor shifting into that of a legal predator. He looked directly at the judge. "Marcus Sterling, Your Honor," he announced, his commanding voice filling the room. "Representing the defendant, Mr. Thomas Miller." The judge's eyebrows shot up. She knew the name. Everyone in this building did. Then, Marcus slowly, deliberately, turned his gaze to Evelyn and her terrified lawyer. He gave them a cold, thin smile that held no warmth at all. "My apologies for the delay," he said, his voice dripping with mock politeness. Then, locking eyes with Evelyn, he delivered the line that shattered her entire world. "He doesn't have to afford me. I'm his older brother." The game hadn't just changed. It had been flipped over, and the board had been set on fire. Marcus opened his briefcase, and the demolition began. He immediately rejected every single one of her demands, labeling them as predatory and filed in bad faith. He announced our intention to file a counterpetition, seeking a full forensic audit of all marital assets and expenditures for the past 3 years. And, he added, we would be demanding that Evelyn be held responsible for all of my legal fees. Her lawyer just stood there, stammering, a minnow in a tank with a great white shark. The battle Evelyn had been so sure of winning was over before it had even begun. The 2 months that followed were a masterclass in legal warfare. My brother doesn't just practice law, he wages it. Evelyn and her lawyer, who had planned a simple rollover, found themselves buried under an avalanche of motions, subpoenas, and discovery requests. Marcus's first move was a motion for discovery, so comprehensive it was a work of art. He demanded every bank statement, every credit card bill, every Venmo transaction, every work expense report Evelyn had generated for the past 5 years. Her lawyer's attempt to dismiss it as harassing was swatted down by the judge, who was clearly not interested in getting on the wrong side of Marcus Sterling. While Evelyn's team was drowning in paperwork, Marcus began a series of depositions designed to apply pressure from every angle. He deposed her friends, her family, and a few of her colleagues. The weak link in her wall of lies turned out to be her best friend, a woman named Chloe. For 3 hours, Marcus charmed and disarmed her, asking innocent questions about Evelyn's happiness, her work trips, her spending habits. Then he went in for the kill. "Miss Albright," he asked, his tone casual, "can you tell me about a Mr. David Kincaid?" I saw Chloe flinch. The name was new to me. She tried to feign ignorance, but Marcus produced a stack of credit card statements from a secret card Evelyn had opened, linked to a joint savings account she'd been secretly draining for over a year. He pointed to a series of charges: a romantic weekend at a hotel in wine country, expensive jewelry, intimate dinners for 2. Evelyn was supposed to be at a work conference on these dates, Marcus stated calmly. But her employer has no record of such a conference. "So I ask you again, who is David Kincaid?" Under penalty of perjury, Chloe broke. David Kincaid was a wealthy real estate developer Evelyn had been having an affair with for 18 months. The whole picture snapped into focus with sickening clarity. She wasn't just leaving me. She was leaving me for him. She was trying to strip mine our marriage, to take my assets to fund her new, upgraded life with her lover. Her lawyer had even been advised by Kincaid, who had assured them I was too poor and too weak to fight back. With proof of the affair, of her perjury in the initial filings, and her misappropriation of marital funds, her case wasn't just dead. It was annihilated. Her lawyer called Marcus, begging to settle. He said Evelyn was willing to drop all her demands, to just walk away. Marcus's reply was cold and final. "No," he said. "Walking away is a privilege she has not earned. We are not settling. We are going to court, and we're going to burn her to the ground. She wanted a war. My brother was more than happy to give her one. It has now been 6 months since that first day in court, when I felt like a man who had lost everything. Today, I know I didn't lose anything that truly mattered. In fact, I gained it all back. The final court date was less a battle and more a surrender ceremony. Faced with a mountain of irrefutable evidence, the depositions confirming her affair, the forensic accounting reports detailing her secret spending, the proof of her conspiracy with her lover to commit fraud, Evelyn had no choice but to capitulate completely. The terms my brother drafted were not merciful. Evelyn didn't just walk away with nothing. She walked away in a hole. She was forced to relinquish any and all claims to the house. Her demand for spousal support was dismissed with prejudice. And because Marcus proved she had spent over $60,000 of marital funds on her affair, the judge ordered that amount to be deducted from her share of our savings and paid back to me. She left the marriage with a fraction of what she'd started with, a mountain of her own legal bills, and the public humiliation of having her entire scheme exposed. The fallout in her new life was equally swift and brutal. Her wealthy lover, David Kincaid, faced with the social and professional embarrassment of being named in a sordid divorce proceeding, dumped her almost immediately. He was attracted to a winner, and Evelyn had just suffered a spectacular public defeat. Her friends, many of whom had been forced to testify about her lies under oath, distanced themselves. In her quest to ruin me, she had managed to lose everything: her fiancé, her house, her savings, her reputation, and her friends. But the real victory, the most important part of this story, had nothing to do with Evelyn. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, Marcus called me. "Meet me at the old house," was all he said. I drove out to our parents' home, the very place that had been the source of our 5-year feud. I found him sitting on the front porch steps. We didn't talk about the case. We talked about being kids, about Dad's terrible fishing trips, and Mom's amazing apple pie. After a long, comfortable silence, he looked at me. "I was wrong, Tommy," he said, his voice quiet. "I was so focused on this place as an asset that I forgot what it really was. It's our home." "I was wrong too," I admitted. "I was so stuck in the past. I couldn't see a future for it." We didn't sell the house. We decided to keep it together. We've spent the last few weekends out there, side by side, fixing it up. We're repairing the porch, painting the walls, bringing it back to life. It's not a monument to a past we fought over anymore. It's a project for a future we're building together. Working with my brother, tools in our hands, has healed a wound I thought would be a scar for life. Evelyn's final, arrogant taunt was that I couldn't afford a lawyer. But her greed, her cruelty, her absolute certainty that I was weak and alone, that was the very thing that forced me to make the phone call that brought my brother back into my life. She thought she was isolating me, but instead, she reunited me with the only family I had left. She tried to leave me with nothing, but as I stand here today in my home with my brother by my side, I realize I have everything that truly matters.